us in understanding the concept of securities regulation. Basically, the idea of the previous class is the reason I thought it's important is because we are studying the regulation of the stock market. And it's very hard to understand the regulation of the stock market without understanding the basic knowledge of the players in the market. Just as you cannot understand the regulation of the, let's say, the medical market without, of physicians, without understanding basic concept of medicine. So you need some understanding of the way the players in the market think in order to understand the regulation of this market. So that's what we did in the first class. And now I would like us to read together, and I will put it, I will share the screen with the following paragraph from one of the most important cases in American legal the history of securities regulation. So let's read it together. And the SEC's Commission's Rule 10b-5, promulgated under 10b, prohibits, in connection with the purchase or sale of any securities, the making of any untrue statement of a material fact or the omission of a material fact that would render statements made not misleading. So basically, Rule 10b-5 is one of the most famous rules in American U.S. securities regulation that basically, as you will see later, it prohibits fraud, it prohibits insider trading, and so on. And the case is about this rule. But what's important is the facts of the case. And the facts of the case are here. In October 1979, Combustion Engineering and Basic Incorporated agreed to merge. During the preceding 2 years, representatives of the two companies had various meetings and conversations regarding the possibility of a merger. During that time, Basic made 3 public statements denying that any merger negotiations were taking place or that in view of any corporate developments that would account for heavy trading activity in its stock. Now, before we continue, does anybody have any idea in our class, why do you think that these directors suddenly made a declaration, a statement, saying we do not engage in any merger negotiations? Why would you, out of the blue, make such a declaration? Does anyone have an idea? Yes, Daniel, please.
Because if it will be known publicly that they're negotiating such merger, it will point to one fact and cause another thing. It will point that perhaps the company worth more than actually right now traded in the stock market, and that on its own will bring competitors, not perhaps many competitors, who will offer even higher price.
Okay, we'll get to this point in a minute, but in a way, what I ask is even an earlier question. Suppose you are right that they don't want people to know that they engage in merger negotiations. Why do you step up and declare that you are not engaged in any merger negotiations? Why not simply...
You mean naturally if there is no malice on both sides?
No. I'm just, look, you don't come up now in class and say, I didn't cheat in the exam, right? You wouldn't say it. If someone suspects you, you may deny, but you will not come to the teacher without any previous examination and tell him, I do not cheat I never cheated in the exam, right? So if you want to hide the fact that you're engaged in merger negotiations, why do you suddenly, out of the blue, step up to the market and say, I do not engage in merger negotiations? In a way, it raises suspicions that you do, because why denying something suddenly out of the blue? Why did they come out with such a declaration? Anybody has an idea? Well, the answer is very simple. They came out with these denials because someone approached them and asked them whether they are engaged in merger negotiations. So basically what happened was that analysts that are active in this market saw that market price, suddenly the volume of trade in the market went up. So instead of 1 million shares trading hands every day, suddenly 10 million shares were traded every day, and market price started to go up. And when things like that happened, people are suspicious that someone knows something that they do not know, which gives reason to such heavy trading. And that's why they approach the management of the company, asking whether they can explain this weird activity in the market. And there were rumors that the company is engaged in merger negotiations. And they asked the management, are you engaged in merger negotiations? And the company simply denied the fact that they are engaged in merger negotiations. And indeed, after 2 years of negotiations, the two companies, Basic and Combustion, came out declaring that they have signed a merger agreement. And of course, then now we can continue reading the case. Respondents filed a class action against Basic and some of its directors, alleging that Basic's statement had been false or misleading and caused the shares of Basics to be traded at prices artificially depressed by those statements. The district court certified respondents' class but granted summary judgment for petitioners on the merits. Namely, the district court ruled in favor of the company, not in favor of the class. So that's where we are. This is the case, and now I would like us to analyze this case. I will stop the sharing. I would like us to analyze the case and see if we can understand what it is all about. So, who are basically the plaintiffs in this case? Anyone? Who do you think has a standing to file such a suit against Basic?
Shareholders of the company.
Shareholders of the company. So, all shareholders of the company?
Shareholders that were affected by the materially false.
Okay. Shareholders of the company that were affected by the misleading statements. Who are the shareholders that were affected?
So usually you would find, I assume, institutional players that hold large sums in companies. You could maybe find some holding companies like BlackRock or stuff like that. And you can find individual shareholders who are just trading for themselves, who aren't
Okay.
active.
So you say basically almost all shareholders. That's what you are saying basically. So let's see if you're right. And I would like to show you now. Can you see now this is the description. Can you see the board now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is the stock price. This graph presents the stock price of Basic. Now let's assume that you, Harel, are an individual who held a stock here at the beginning of the fraud, right? And you are holding it also here. You see here at this point, can you see
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
At this point, this is where you see the stock price went up here. Can you see it? And here there is the declaration of the merger agreement was signed, and that's why you can see this suddenly the market price goes up significantly, and then it keeps straight. So you held the stock here at the beginning. You are still holding the stock here, and I'm asking you, Harel, where is your loss?
Here I might not have a loss, but if I sold it prematurely, then I do have a loss. That's why.
Now we're talking. Now we are talking. So it's not all the shareholders that have a right to sue, right?
Right.
So let's try to define very carefully who are the members, who are the plaintiffs. The plaintiffs must show that they suffered a loss, right? So I would like you to define very carefully who are the plaintiffs here. Who are the victims of the fraud?
So I would define them as shareholders who, based upon the information presented by the company, liquidize their stock prior to the stock price going up.
Okay, very nice. So you're suggesting, Harel, that members of the class, these are the plaintiffs, that, as you know, when someone files a class action, he or she should be a member of the class. So he or she must show that they suffered the loss, and they represent all the members of the class who also suffered a similar loss. So what you are suggesting is that the class members are all, Gilad, did you just raise my graph?
Sorry. Now it's SVB, it's off trading.
That's nice. That was, okay. So we'll do it again. I didn't know that you can do such a thing, but it's very...
You fix something and then I erase it all.
Okay. So here we are now. Okay. It's not as nice as it used to, but anyway. Yeah. So we are talking about the people who sold shares in this period of time until the truth came out and they signed the merger agreement, right? Harel, have I defined your class accurately?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you please redefine it?
That these are people who sold it in reliance on the misleading statements. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we understand the class, and I would like now to make it more concrete, the class members. So in order for that to happen, now let's say you see that here at this point of time, at the beginning, merger negotiation started here at this point. The second point here is where the analysts approach the management, asking whether they know of anything that can explain the unusual trading, and the managers denied. They didn't know how to explain it. And at this point, there is the second denial of the merger negotiation. And here's the third denial of the merger negotiation. And at this point, the truth comes out. Okay? So let's try to see, how do we define the class? Suppose, Harel, that you sold your shares here, this period of time, when the merger negotiation started, until the first denial of the merger negotiations, did you suffer a loss?
No, because the stock price hasn't gone up yet.
Well, the stock price didn't go up because they did not disclose the fact that they are engaged in merger negotiation. Had they disclosed the merger negotiations, maybe stock price would have gone up here, right? Yeah. And we would have sold in a higher price. What do you say about this?
The stock may have gone up, but ultimately it didn't. So he
didn't. But that's your claim. Your claim is that the misleading statements deflated artificially the price. Had they revealed the truth about the merger negotiation, let's try to see if I can do.
But they're no longer shareholders. How can they sue?
Okay.
But they were shareholders at the time. That's a claim.
Yeah, but the plaintiffs are suing in the name of the company.
No.
No.
Okay, Daniel. Let's clarify the point. This is not a derivative suit. This is a class action. When you file a derivative suit, you file a claim as a shareholder on behalf of the company. On the other hand, when you file a class action, you represent shareholders who suffered the loss because of certain foul that the company made, and you are not filing it on behalf of the company. On the contrary, you file it against the company. Okay? So basically, now I would like to describe now a theoretical, Harel, for you. I would like to describe now a theoretical line that describes the way the stock would have traded if the management would have come out at the beginning declaring that they are engaged in merger negotiations. Okay? Now let's assume, let's see, can I change the color somehow? Let's see if I can change the color. Probably I can, but let's see. Okay.
Press the black circle.
The black circle. Okay, never mind. I'll do it in the same color.
The left side it's written color in a black dot.
If you press the black dot, you will change the color.
I have no idea what you're talking about, but let's say I'll do it in a different. Let's say the price would have looked like this. Okay. So Ariel, the thin line is the alternative. Now you can see that had you sold here at this point, And if the management would have disclosed the truth, you would have sold at this price. Okay? Are you with me, Ariel?
Always.
So you basically suffered a loss. And the question is whether you have standing to bring a claim. What do you think?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Anyone object? What is the significant difference between Harel, who sold at the period of time between the merger negotiation the started and the first denial, and someone like Olivier, who sold, let's say, between the second denial and the third denial? Okay, so Olivier sold here at this point, and Harel sold at this point. What is the significance of the difference between the period of time in which Harel sold and the period of time in which Olivier sold? Anyone?
Because RL did not took into consideration what the directors of the company told him, and Olivier took into consideration. It was one of his considerations.
Very nice, Daniel. Look, Harel, you defined the class at the beginning as shareholders who sold their shares in reliance on the misleading statement, right?
Yes.
But URL did not rely on any statement because there was no statement, right?
This is the point of the first denial where I sold, you said.
No, this is the first denial here.
So,
okay?
So if I didn't rely, I don't have that.
You sold before the first denial. And therefore, even though you may argue that you suffered a loss, you did not rely on the misleading statement. Am I right?
Correct.
So in cross-examination, you admit that you did not rely on the false statement. And therefore, maybe you're not a member of the class. Is there a way for you to argue that you did rely on something?
A way to argue always. I'll say that at this point, maybe there were negotiation discussions and they didn't disclose it. And I was expecting for there to be negotiation discussions, and insofar that they weren't disclosed, I thought I was wrong and I sold the stock.
Okay, what you're saying basically, they should have disclosed the fact that they are engaged in merger negotiations. And the fact that they kept silent made me think, me meaning RL, that there are no merger negotiations. And therefore, I relied on their silence as a signal that there are no merger negotiations. And therefore, I sold the stock. Am I right, Ariel?
Yes.
Wonderful. So I convince you that you do have a cause of action. However, Ariel, this allegation of yours relies or assumes that the company has a duty to disclose the fact that it is engaged in merger negotiations.
It is. If it's material, 8K, you have to disclose the material information.
Are you sure about it?
Well, if you're afraid that it will affect badly the negotiations or something like that, then no, or you could maybe go no comment. But usually material events, you have to go with it to the market.
Well, it turns out that under US securities regulation, the duty to make what we call an immediate report on something is quite narrow. Unlike the Israeli securities regulation, in which there is a duty to make public immediately public announcement of any material change in the company, subject to certain qualifications. In the US, it's the opposite. There are particular events that you must disclose rapidly. Otherwise, you have the right to keep silent. So basically, what the court is saying in this case, is you are not under a duty to disclose the fact that you are engaged in merger negotiation. There is no such general duty of disclosure. And therefore, LL, despite your nice try, if you sold the shares at the beginning of the merger negotiations, before the company made its first denial, you have no right to sue. Because the company was not under a duty to disclose the fact that it is engaged in merger negotiations. Okay? Ariel, I'm sorry, you're out of the class, not of our class, but of the class section. However, Daniel, or Olivier, I forgot who sold here, Olivier, I think, I'm sorry. So Olivier who sold here, or anybody who sold after the first allegation and until the truth came out, may argue that they sold the shares after the company made a false statement. And then our next question will be, well, if the company had no duty to disclose, why does the company have no right to make a false statement? It is so obvious that you are allowed to keep silent, but you are not allowed to make a false statement on something. Okay, we'll keep this question aside for a minute, and we'll go now to a different question, and in order to understand the problem of this case, and in order to understand the problem of the case, let's first analyze what are the elements that a plaintiff in a fraud case must prove. What do you have to prove when you file a case of fraud? Anyone? Shiri, I see that you are really into it. So what are the elements of fraud that you have to prove? First
Actually,
element.
I'm sorry. I don't know. I just joined to the course today. So Sharon let me know about 1 hour ago that I can join. So I tried to.
Okay, that's
Sorry.
okay. You still studied tort law. What is the first element you have to prove, or just out of your logic? Okay, what do you have to prove when you have a fraud case?
That some money went, I don't know, like.
Okay, you have to prove a loss. You have to prove a loss. Okay, that's true. What else do you have to prove?
Probably you have to prove that the shareholders were deceived and misled. So the deceit, you have to prove the fact of a deceit.
Okay, you have to prove that someone lied, right? That someone made a misleading statement. So you have to prove a misleading statement. You have to prove a loss. What else do you have to prove?
Causality, that there's an effect between the loss and the misleading statement.
Okay, you have to prove causality, causation between the misleading statement and the loss. Okay, what else do you have to prove?
Awareness
Awareness of whom?
of the one that he is not, but it's preposterous, because actually I don't think you can unintentionally mislead someone. Although
I do it all the time, aren't you? You make
maybe
mistakes.
I'm basing too heavily on this current case, but when you're committing a fraud, I find hard to imagine committing a fraud by mistake. You can mislead by mistake, but you cannot make a fraud by mistake.
Okay, that means that if you want to file a case of fraud, you have to
Intent,
prove
perhaps?
some type of intent. Right, of course. Otherwise, it's not a fraud. It may be a negligent misrepresentation, but it's not fraud. If you want to prove fraud, you have to prove intention. So you have to prove that there was a misleading statement. You have to prove intent to defraud. You have to prove loss, causation. That's already 4 elements. What else? You can see it's quite a hard case to prove. What else do you have to prove?
The materiality of the fraud.
Materiality, very nice. Materiality. What else?
Can you please explain materiality?
Okay, who said materiality? Kate, did you say?
No, that's me.
Elephant. So what do you mean by materiality?
So it's to be sure that the thing that someone was defrauded about is important enough so it can lead to legal action.
Right. So the information that you disseminated was material, that it was important. We'll get to it more deeply in a minute. But you have to prove that the information is not something trivial. It is important. Otherwise, you shouldn't bother the court with such a trivial issue, right? You must show it was material. And the last element, Ariel, your first point. What was your first point that you have to prove?
Loss.
Loss, we talked about the loss.
Maybe
Reliance.
maybe the target of the loss. I mean
Right.
the actual individuals who suffered this loss.
Yeah, so the individual who suffered the loss must also prove reliance.
Yeah.
Okay. So there are 7 elements here. Intent, misleading statement, intent to defraud, materiality. Or did I miss it? Loss.
I have 6. I wrote it down 6.
Causation. Okay, 6 is quite enough. Okay. So in this case, it's clear that we have a misleading statement, right? Is it clear that we have an intent to defraud?
No.
No. Well, arguably, it's clear that the management knew, it was conscious about the fact that it makes a false statement, right? You cannot deny that, Ariel.
No, I'm not denying that.
Good. So at least we know that they knew that they are defrauding. Maybe they didn't want to defraud, but they knew they are defrauding, which might be enough. We'll talk about it later. So there is a misleading statement. There is an intent to defraud in a way. We realize there is a loss. We talked about it. Now, so what are we left with? We are left with basically 2 basic issues, or 3. We are left with materiality, we are left with reliance, and we are left with causation. Okay. I would like to start first with reliance. What is the problem in this case with reliance? Anybody? Why do we have a problem of reliance here?
How can I prove that I would have sold if they wouldn't have told me that specific answer?
How would you prove that again?
For example, I'm just giving an example. How can I prove that I would do specific something that will make me more profit if they would give me a different answer? You can say I will probably do, but you can't prove I would for sure do that.
Okay, but you can prove. That's what RL argued.
It's hard.
Wait. RL argued, Olivier argued earlier that he sold the shares after he heard that the management denied the merger negotiations. And he argued that he did it in reliance on this statement, meaning that without these false denials, he wouldn't have sold, right, Olivier? That's what you testified in court. And I believe you. You seems like a very honest guy, and I believe your testimony. So, and let's say Olivier also shows a WhatsApp he sent to his friends in real time. After these denials of the management, I'm selling the stock. I'm fed up with this company. Okay? So you have a proof. So it may be hard, but we have a proof. And I argue still that despite what Olivier is saying here, and let's say Olivier is the representative of the class, there is still a problem of reliance here. A huge problem of reliance. Anyone wants to argue why there is a problem of reliance here? Okay, so Olivier, you are the representative of this class, and you are now on the stand, and I'm asking the following question in cross-examination.
Yeah.
I believe you that you sold the shares in reliance on these misleading statements. Oh, by the way, before we go on, why did you sell the shares?
Because the price was going up and I didn't think that I could make more money after that statement.
But why still? And what did you do with this? After you sold the shares, what did you do with the money?
I reinvested it in other companies.
In another company. Why did you invest in the other company? Did you know something about the other company? Why wouldn't you reinvest after you sold the shares? Why wouldn't you reinvest in this company also? Again.
Because I didn't know what was going to happen. It was unexpected.
But with the other company, you also didn't know what would happen. You never know what would happen in the future unless you have inside information. But if you don't have inside information, you never know what's going to be in the future.
It's true.
So if you don't know anything about the other company, and you don't know anything about this company, why would you sell and buy a different stock and simply pay commission? It's the logic. Leave it aside. Let's put it aside for now. So let's assume you did sell the shares because of these statements, okay? As I said, I don't really believe you, but let's assume this is the case. What about the other members of the class? Why did they sell? Do you know? You don't know. So you don't know if they sold because they relied on the misleading statements.
Well, maybe it's because of the market price of like the...
You don't know why they sold. Let's take Kate, for example, who is a member of the class. Kate, you sold the shares, but please confirm the fact that you never even heard about the management's denials of the merger negotiations. Am I right?
Yes, you're right.
You sold the shares because you needed the money. You wanted to buy a car, and you sold the shares because you wanted to buy the car. It has nothing to do with the fact that the management disseminated these denials. So in this class, we don't know who are these people in the class. There are a million people in this class that you, Olivier, represent. Okay, you were lied. Let's assume that you were lied. But there are a million of people in this class. We don't know anything about them other than the fact that they sold the shares. We don't know why they sold the shares. And the problem is that in order to prove the reliance, you have to call them to the court to testify, and we have to ask each one of them, why did you sell the shares? And once we have to ask each one of them, why did you sell the shares? It is no longer a class action. It is an individual claim of each one of the members of the class. When you find a class action, there must be a common question for all of the members of the class. And if it's a different claim for each member of the class, it is no longer a class action. So the real problem with the reliance issue is that once you acquire once the case is dependent on reliance as an element of the cause of action, there is no way in which this can be a class action. It is an individual claim that each member of the class should bring on his or on her own. And that is one reason why the district court denied the action. Maybe, I don't know, actually. I never read the district court decision. We'll get back to it in a minute. Okay. So how do we overcome, as we know, the class won in the Supreme Court, they won also in the Court of Appeal. How do we overcome the problem of reliance? Anyone?
Yeah, may I? I think there could be a presumption of a common reason for filing a class action. So all the plaintiffs are presumed to have been harmed by the misleading actions, and they are united by one common problem, one common reason.
Okay. But the fact that they were all harmed, why does it mean that there was a reliance?
Yeah, maybe it's the task of the respondent to prove that that each of the plaintiffs had a little bit different purpose for filing this claim. So each one was affected differently by the misleading statement.
But if each one of them was affected differently, then it's no longer a class action.
Absolutely. That's why the presumption is needed to protect the plaintiff.
But in regular cases, there is no such presumption. The plaintiff must prove that he relied. Gilad, do you want to say something? You raise your hands.
Yes, I think that the stock market, the presumption is that the price at any time is pricing in, all information is priced in the stock market every second. So it doesn't matter, it makes no difference why the reason that I sold the shares, it doesn't matter. The fact is that I sold, and another fact is that you hide essential information for me. So it doesn't matter why, if I bought a car, if I reinvested, or if I bought something to my wife, it doesn't matter. The fact that I sold based on a specific information or not is that's the fact that matters here.
Okay, that's exactly what the court is saying. Gilad, you can be on the Supreme Court of the United States. There's a...
Interviews are tomorrow, so I'll just write it in.
Okay. So, basically what the Supreme Court is saying is the following. I just heard there is a new paper published in the Journal of Finance, which says, very surprisingly, that the stock market is efficient. Now, what does it mean that the stock market is efficient? It means, and this is what we call the efficient capital market hypothesis, ECMH, it means that the stock market has this quality that whenever a new information comes out, the market price responds immediately, instantly, immediately, and accurately to the new information. And if this is true, then, as Gilad is saying, it really doesn't matter if Olivier heard, even read or heard about the merger negotiations or the denials of the merger negotiation. He sold the shares at a price that reflects the false information, even if he never heard the false information. And this is a major difference between selling or buying, trading in the stock market, buying shares in the stock market, or buying a used car. So let's say Olivier and I negotiate a deal regarding my used car. Olivier comes to me and he wants to buy a used car from me. And I'm telling Olivier that the car was never involved in an accident. This is, of course, false. But this is what I'm telling him. And he is willing to buy. But it turns out that when I told him that the car was never involved in a car accident, it was in a Zoom meeting, and I was muted. So we never heard it. Friends of mine that sat with me in the room, they did hear it, but Olivier never heard it. So when Olivier later on sues me, files a suit against me, he cannot demonstrate reliance because he never heard my false statement. And the fact that my friends who sat near me in the room heard the false statement doesn't assist Olivier in his claim. And the reason is that my used car is not traded in an efficient market. The shares of basic company, on the other hand, are traded in an efficient market. And therefore, the fact that Olivier never heard the story is not aware at all to the full statements that the management made, doesn't mean that he didn't trade in a price that reflects the false information. Because in an efficient market, the price of the shares of any asset, if the asset is traded in an efficient market, the price of the asset reflects the information, even if the traders themselves are not aware of the information. So basically what the court is saying in basic, the Supreme Court is saying, Olivier relied on the efficiency of the market, on the honesty of the market. He didn't rely on the statement, but he relied on the market. And the market reflects the false information. The market price reflects the false information, even though Olivier and the other members of the class were not aware of it. So the court decision adopts not a presumption of reliance in the usual meaning of the term, but he adopts a presumption of an efficient market. That's why it is called the efficient capital market hypothesis. It's a hypothesis that the court adopts as a presumption, and the defendant may refute, as a defense, may try to refute the efficiency of the market. But as long as they are not able to refute the presumption of efficiency, the plaintiffs overcome the reliance problem threshold by simply saying the market is efficient, this is the presumption of the court, and therefore I don't have to prove the reliance of each and every individual that is a member of the class. Any question until this point?
Yeah, so what the court actually decides that there is like an axiom, the market always right, and he doesn't expect you to disprove the theory. He wants you to disprove that on this specific case, the theory is wrong or it just didn't work.
Almost, yeah. Well, few corrections. The assumption is not that the market is always right. Here, the market was not right. The market was not right because the statements were misleading. The market reflects immediately and accurately the information that is out there. It doesn't mean that the market is right because the information may be false, okay? But the market reflects accurately the information, even if it's a false information, okay?
So theoretically, if someone in future case will show that the market not always reflects it correctly, then the whole previous cases fall apart.
Exactly. Exactly. So the defense in such class actions is typically, one defense is that in this particular stock, the market is not efficient. So, but before we get there, I would like first for us to get deeper into the concept of what does it mean when we say that the market is efficient, okay? Now, in the literature, in the finance literature, we distinguish between three types of efficient markets. there is the strong form of efficiency, the semi-strong of efficiency, and the weak form of efficiency. Okay? In all these three forms, share the same value. In all three forms, the market reacts rapidly and accurately to the information. The difference between these forms is in the scope of information to which the market responds so accurately. In the strong form efficiency, the market responds rapidly and accurately to any information that exists in the market. Okay? In semi-strong efficiency, the market responds accurately and rapidly to any information that is publicly available. So you see the strong form only to respond to any information that is out there in the market. Semi-strong only if the information is made publicly available. In the weak form efficient market, the market responds accurately and rapidly to any information that relates to price. Okay, price information. So, for example, if the price of oil goes up in a weak form efficient market, the prices of all assets responds immediately and accurately to the rise of the price of oil. Okay? Are we clear about the three forms? Great. So if we are clear on the three forms of efficiency, let's now try to see if we can argue what form of efficiency should the court adopt as a presumption in order to allow class actions like the one in BASIC. Anyone? What form of efficiency? Is it the strong, the semi-strong, or the weak form of efficiency that would allow a plaintiff to overcome the reliance threshold?
I think the semi-strong is actually maybe enough.
Okay. Anyone else? Anyone thinks differently? Okay. You say that the semi-strong efficiency seems to be enough. Okay, why?
Because the denial is public knowledge.
Exactly.
So
the denials were made publicly available by the management. Therefore, in a semi-strong efficient market, we assume that the market responds rapidly and accurately to this information. And therefore, when Olivier sold the shares in the market after the denials were made, he sold it in a price that reflects the false information. Right? Everybody? Great. But you said, Daniel, that it is sufficient that the market will be semi-strong and efficient. What if the market was efficient in the strong form? Would Olivier also be able to file the suit?
I think the difference, if we're talking about the strong form, is that the ones who sold before the first denial can also sue.
I see. Interesting. So you're saying if there is information, if the market was efficient in the strong form, then even RL, where is RL? We lost RL. Okay, I'm sorry. He probably understood that he's out of the class. Ah, he's here, I'm sorry. RL, are you up? Okay, never mind. We won't bother RL. Anyway, so RL sold before the first denial, and what you're saying, Daniel, is that the market price reflected the information before, even though it was not made public. Right, Daniel? Interesting. Anybody who agrees and who doesn't agree? What's the problem? There is a problem, a logical problem with Daniel's claim. Anyone? Anyone sees the problem with the logical problem with Daniel's claim?
About the claim of the strong market?
You said that if the market is strong efficient in the strong form, then even RL will be able to file the case because the information was there before the first denial was made. But what is the information? Yes, Olivier, you can see the problem?
I would say it would be basically like insider trading. It would be like information that's known from a source that's basically illegal.
Yeah, but what is the information?
The stock exchange, there was rising. Why they had to deny in the first place? Because someone noticed that was a relatively paranormal activity in the stocks of the company. So the information was there.
But what information was there? What was the information?
The fact that the stocks were exchanging.
But what was the information? Were the denials reflected in the market price? You see, your problem, Daniel, is that before the first denial was made, there was no denial in the market. No one held the false information in the market before the first denial was made.
And they don't have to disclose information, as we spoke in the beginning.
It would not have been reflected in the market price, even when if the market was strongly efficient. But you are right that a certain market was reflected in the market if the market was efficient in the strong form. What type of information was reflected?
The mild rise of the stock price?
That was the price, but why did this rise take place? What information it reflects?
The merger.
The merger negotiations, of course. So it turns out, Daniel, that if the merger negotiations, if the market was efficient in the strong form, then that means that the merger negotiations, the information about the merger negotiations, which was held by several people, by the management of Basic, by the management of Combustions, by advisors of these managements. I'm sure there were at least 50 people that were confidential to this information, right? So the information was in the market. Someone traded on this information. And by trading on this information, affected the market price. So if it's true that the market was efficient in the strong form, that means that the information about the merger negotiation, the truth, not the fraud, the truth was reflected in the market price even if it was not publicly available. That is an efficient market in the strong form. And I'm asking you now again, Daniel, in cross-examination, whether you think that in a strong form efficient market, you could file such a suit. Gilad, what do you think?
I think that these incidents are happening every day on a daily basis, even nowadays. Now that we have specific rules and everything, it still happens. Why? Because the price was gradually inflated. It wasn't in one time. Because why? Because that was it reflects the chances of having this negotiation of M&A. So that's why the price was inflated gradually. Most of the people were buying in the first stages, and then the truth was out, but there was an information gap between those 40, 50, or 60 people that traded on the inside information. That information was priced in the stock in the trading, and it doesn't matter if they denied or not, because they denied, so it just the price was adjusted, but a bit slower. But eventually, that was the truth, and it was reflected in the price in the stock market.
Okay. So what you're saying, Gilad, is basically when we look at the way the market price reacted, the market price was playing here. What you're saying is that if we follow this trend here, arguably the market was efficient, not in the semi-strong, but in the strong form. How do we know it? Because the market price started to go up, even though the information about the negotiations was not publicly available. And even though the management denied here and again here and again here, the market price still went up. Now, it didn't go up the way Harel thought it should go up here. And the reason it didn't go up this way is because the merger negotiations went slowly. We were only negotiating. We didn't know that the transaction will take place. It took 2 years to negotiate. And as the negotiations progressed, slowly but surely, market price went up because the probability that the merger will consume went up. And it went up dramatically after the negotiation consumed and the transaction was signed. Yeah. But until this point, we were not sure that it will consume.
But all these investors, yes, all these investors from 1 to 2, okay, that reflects the beliefs, okay, the beliefs and the chances and the probability of the merge that it will be closed. Now, if in this point they deny, and this is truth, I mean, the M&A exploded, okay, so the price goes down back here, right?
Okay. Okay, but here's my question again. But here's my question, and it's the question to all of you. So there are 2 ways to think about the market in basic stock. One is that the market is semi-strong efficient, and the other is that the market is strong form efficient. My question now is whether if the market is efficient in the strong form, can Olivier file a suit? That's my question. Can Olivier file a claim if the market is efficient in the strong form? Olivier, what do you think?
The answer would be no.
And why?
Because it would be presumed that I would know the information as soon as the market would start to move, aka earlier than prior to the statement.
Okay. It's not presumed that you will know. It's presumed that the market knows. And therefore, if the market knows, the market price reflects the true information, then you sold the stock in a market price that reflects the true information, even though only the false information is available to the public. So the information you knew is false, but the market price reflects the true information. Therefore, there's no way for you to file a suit. Therefore, we can reach the following conclusion. As defendant in such a class action, you have two ways, almost opposite ways to defend yourself. One way is to try to refute the efficient capital market hypothesis by saying, for example, that we follow the history of the shares of basic company, in our example, it will show that in the past, it didn't react rapidly and accurately to information. Its response to information was always very slow. We will argue that the reason it is very slow is because the market for basic shares is very thin. Very few shares are traded every minute. We will argue that very few analysts, or no analysts at all, cover the basic company. We will argue that there is only one market maker for the shares of basic and so on. So all the elements that make the market efficient are not there in this particular company. Markets are efficient because there is very heavy trading. The volume of trading is very big. So when the volume of trading is very big, the information that investor holds are streaming into the market by their trades. Markets are efficient when many analysts cover the company and make reports available to the market. Markets are efficient when there are many market makers that make market for the particular stock and they are competing with one another. So there are different elements in the market that make the market efficient, different mechanisms. If you show that these mechanisms are not operating for the particular shares on which the class action is filed, then you may refute the efficient capital market hypothesis. So this is one way to defend against a class action that relies on the efficient capital market hypothesis. But you have an alternative defense. And the alternative defense is to argue that the market was efficient in the strong form. For example, maybe in basic you can show it when you show that despite what what you're saying that I defrauded the market didn't believe me. The market still went up. Now I would like to tell you a story about a case in which the defendants went exactly this way. Well, it's not exactly, but a similar way. a third type of defense. Okay, so we said one defense is refute the efficient capital market hypothesis. Second defense, show that the market was efficient in the strong form. And now is the third type of defense. And the story is about Steve Jobs. Anyone heard about Steve Jobs? Nice. Okay, great. So Steve Jobs, it was in the early 70s, the late Steve Jobs. He was then quite alive and kicking and very popular. And he called a press conference, one of his big shows. And in this press conference, he declared a new product called the Lisa computer. And he said that the Lisa computer is a new computer, new type of computer, a wonderful computer. And this computer will be, wait, what do we do here? Okay. So the Lisa computer is a new computer. It's going to be a hit in the market. And there was the press went crazy about it. There was a 2-page column about it in the Los Angeles Times. And I don't know if you ever held the Los Angeles Times, but this is kind of a huge paper. Covers your whole bed. And market price went up. Market price of Apple went up 60%. Unfortunately, 3 months later, it turned out that it was a flop. And Lisa computer had all kind of technological problems, and there were all kind of marketing problems, and market price went down back to the same point, even lower. Okay, now as you can assume, immediately someone filed a class action. Who were members of the class actions this time? Anybody?
What was the question again?
Okay. The claim is that Steve Jobs made a false claim, false statement when he claimed that this Lisa computer will be a huge success. Why was it false? Because he didn't disclose the technological problem and the marketing problems of Lisa. So market price went up 60%, and then when the truth came out, market price went down 60%, back to the initial point. Now I'm asking, who are members of the class this time?
About the technical problem, so isn't a problem. But if it was just a projection that he really believed that Lisa is great computer, so everything is okay, but it's just
wait. I'm asking, nobody really cares about the real facts. The reality is that there is a class action. And I'm asking only one question. Who are the members of the class action?
The people who bought between the initial announcement of Lisa and to the, I want to say until the news came out, who lost money because of it.
Right, exactly. We talk about the fraud period.
Correct.
The fraud period is the time between the false information came out by Steve Jobs until the point of time in which the truth came out, okay? And market price went down. So here, unlike in basic case, the argument was the false information deflated the market price. And therefore, the class action the members of the class were those people who sold the shares. Here, in the Apple case, in the Steve Jobs case, the false information inflated the market price, right? And therefore, the plaintiffs are those who bought the shares in the fraud period, okay? That's the difference. Okay, so we have a class action. We know who are the plaintiffs. We know who is the class. The market is efficient. We saw market price went up dramatically, then went down dramatically. Market is efficient. So how would Steve Jobs defend himself? Clearly, first of all, he can say, well, I didn't know that this will about the technological problem. I didn't know about the marketing problems. But you have to realize that we are now in a situation where we are only at what we call asking whether the class would we approve of or not. We are not getting into the factual issues. The plaintiffs argued that Steve Jobs made an intentional false statement. You cannot disprove it at this stage. This will be in trial. We are now only asking whether the trial can start. So we assume that all the facts that were alleged in the complaint are accurate. And Steve Jobs raises the following question. The following defense. Let's assume that you are right, that I intentionally failed to disclose the problems of Lisa. Let's assume you're right. However, when you open the Los Angeles Times and you see the description of my statements in this conference, as I told you, it's 2 pages, it's huge. But down in the second page, there is a small column made by an analyst, 100 words, in which he says, pay attention, Steve Jobs didn't say, but I'm telling you that there are all kinds of technological problems with Lisa and marketing problems. So Steve Jobs said, well, I failed to disclose it, but this analyst, he disclosed the information that you claim that I failed to disclose. If you are right that the market is efficient in the semi-strong form, as you claim, then the market price reflects not only the information that I gave, but also the information that the analyst gave. Therefore, market price reflected the true information. And even though I defrauded the market, the analyst corrected my fraud and made the true information reflected in the market price. Okay, so that's the third type of defense, and I'm asking you, what do you think about this defense? Does it make sense? Or maybe it doesn't. Anybody wants to play on this? Okay,
I
then
mean, I don't
Olivier,
think it's a good
sorry.
defense. I don't think it's a good defense because
Why?
then because anybody from a third party can claim anything, and so it could be defamation. You don't know like to what extent you can circumscribe the rules based on a statement made by a person who isn't the main person giving that information. So anybody could say anything about any situation, and then it would be really hard to legislate or establish who's who. So I don't like the defense at all. It has to come from the source. I would say it has to come from the source directly, like the official company, its website, or the person himself.
So what you're saying, if I understand it correctly, is that although the information was made available to the market, maybe the market price did not reflect the information? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, yeah, there's no way of proving that this person who's making the claim is true or not because it's coming from a third party. We don't know its credibility. We don't know what it is. So it would just be manipulation if anybody could say anything about any situation.
Okay.
I think that nowadays, at least, a lot of people work as like short analysts where they put out reports, and the second they put out a report, the stock price plummets when they're short on a stock. So if you build credibility and reputation over the years, then you might as well have the same influence. It's like they just sued Elon Musk for Bitcoin, where he put out a tweet and sold right before he put out the tweet about the price of Bitcoin. So I don't think it matters if it's internal or external to that extent.
Okay. So basically we have two positions here. Olivia says, well, this analyst, who knows who he is? Steve Jobs. We all trust Steve Jobs. So, and Harel is saying, well, the analyst may be more credible than Steve Jobs. Because Steve Jobs, look, Steve Jobs is not objective. Steve Jobs wants to sell computers. And when he goes public about this Lisa computer, he cannot say there are technological problems. No one would buy it. He wants to sell computers. He's a salesman. Whereas the analyst, this is his job. His job is to criticize companies. And he wants to keep his reputation as a credible analyst. So,
well,
maybe.
Add some.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Alexei.
Yeah. I just want to add that it's also, worth checking the credibility of this analyst, because the analysts are also paid by the companies. They're sponsored by certain the media they work for. They're sponsored by certain forces, by certain authorities.
Yeah, maybe it's a question. I'm not saying who is right here. It's a question. Who should the market trust more, Steve Jobs or the analyst? It's a question. Really a good question.
Yeah, I think there is no answer to this question.
I agree.
So both the statements can cause, massive disruption on the market.
Right. We talk about it more deeper in a few classes. However, what's important here is what the court is really saying here. The court is saying the following: look, you, the plaintiffs, you rely on the efficient market hypothesis. And what does this hypothesis says? That the market reflects any information. Okay? Any publicly available information. We allow you to bring this suit on this presumption. Now, you cannot argue that this presumption operates vis-a-vis Steve Jobs and it doesn't operate vis-a-vis the analyst. If you want to prove it, now it's your turn to prove that it works only vis-a-vis Steve Jobs and it doesn't work vis-a-vis the analyst. Okay, so since you brought the case according to efficient capital market hypothesis, if you want, now it's your burden to prove that it doesn't work, it doesn't respond accurately and rapidly to the analyst, but only responds so to Steve Jobs. Since you did not prove it, you cannot, we cannot approve the class here. And the court basically rejects the class action against Steve Jobs. And the rest is history, of course. Okay, guys, we'll meet next week again. Thank you for this class, and enjoy the rest of the week. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Goodbye.